2.7 grams. That is exactly how much a standard table tennis ball weighs. A hollow piece of celluloid filled with gas. It seems like the most harmless thing in the world. A toy for basements and office breaks. But you are mistaken. In the world of physics, mass is nothing without acceleration. And when this weightless projectile accelerates to 160 kilometers per hour, it ceases to be a toy. It turns into a bullet capable of leaving a hematoma on human skin. But the problem isn't the pain. The problem is time. At a distance of 2.5 meters, the standard length of a tennis table, your brain has exactly 0.15 seconds to see the ball. Not to hit it, just to see it. The signal from the retina must pass through the optic nerve, reach the occipital lobe of the cerebral cortex, be processed, and only then be sent to the muscles of the forearm. This is a biological limit. This is a wall that evolution built for our safety. We are not created to react at the speed of light. We are created to hide or run. However, in 1970, one man decided that evolution was wrong. Imagine a closed sports hall in Hong Kong. The air here is dense, soaked in the smell of expensive tobacco, old wood, and male ego. No laughter is heard here. Only heavy breathing and the squeak of sneakers on lacquered parquet are audible. In the center of the room stands a table, a green surface divided by a white net. This is the altar of speed, and today a sacrifice must take place on this altar. On one side of the table stands the champion. We won't name him. History has erased him, leaving only a function. Let's call him the master of the racket. In his hands is the perfect instrument. Multi-layered plywood, vulcanized rubber pads, an ergonomic handle. This instrument was created over decades by engineers to give a human maximum control over spin and bounce. The champion is confident. He knows the geometry of the table better than the back of his hand. He knows that the ball always flies where he directs it. On the other side stands Bruce Lee. He is calm, frighteningly calm. He is wearing his famous yellow suit, which became not just a symbol of style, but a warning, like the coloring of a poisonous frog in the Amazon jungle. But look at his hands. There is no racket. There is nothing flat or solid with which to control the flight of a sphere. Dangling from his hands are two lacquered wooden sticks connected by a short steel chain. Nunchucks, a peasant weapon that became a legend. But let's be honest from the perspective of mechanics. Nunchucks are a generator of chaos. They are two levers connected by a flexible coupling. In physics, this is called a double pendulum system. Their trajectory is impossible to predict with mathematical precision unless you are a computer. Any deviation of the wrist at the input, even by a millimeter, results in a half-meter spread at the output. To use this weapon to hit a 40-millimeter ball flying at the speed of a bullet? This isn't just difficulty. This is madness. The contact area between a round stick and a round ball is negligible. It is a single point in space and time. If you miss by a fraction of a millimeter, the ball will fly into the ceiling or the floor. If you don't calculate the rotation angle of the stick, the ball will bounce into your face. There is no right to make a mistake here. There is no margin of error. But why did Bruce agree to this? Was it arrogance? A desire to humiliate the champion? No. It is much more complex. Before the first strike rings out, pay attention to one small detail lying on the very edge of the table, next to the net. It is not sports equipment. It is a gold Zippo lighter. It stands vertically. Its lid is closed. The metal gleams coldly in the lamplight. It seems like someone simply forgot it there, a random object in a random place. But in Bruce Lee's world, there are no accidents. This lighter is not trash. It is the key to understanding what will happen in a minute. It is a timer that hasn't been started yet. And when you understand why it stands there, your idea of human capabilities will collapse. Silence hung in the hall. Absolute vacuum silence, the kind that exists only before an execution or a miracle. The champion on the other side of the table smirks. He sees a clown with sticks in front of him. He thinks he is about to show this actor what real sport is. He tosses the weightless ball into the air. The white sphere hovers at the zenith, preparing to begin its fall. No one in the hall knows yet that the laws of physics they are used to have just been repealed. Bruce doesn't look at the ball. He looks through it. His muscles are relaxed, like water. But inside this water, a tsunami is brewing. The first sound of impact is about to tear this silence apart, and it will be a sound that no one present will ever be able to forget. The ball is tossed. It hangs at the highest point of its trajectory, in that elusive moment when the kinetic energy of the ascent runs out, and gravity hasn't yet taken its rights. In this fraction of a second, the world in the hall narrowed to the size of a white spot against a green wall. But before gravity pulls the sphere down, let's dissect the anatomy of this confrontation. Because if you think this is just a game, you understand nothing about the nature of conflict. On one side of the table stands a professional. His name is Chen. His body is a mechanism honed for a single task, returning spinning objects with surgical precision. His pulse is 55 beats. His racket grip is European, allowing him to attack from both sides. He looks at Bruce not as a movie legend, but as an amateur who brought a knife to a gunfight. And there is iron logic in his reasoning. Table tennis is a game of spins. Top spin, back spin, side spin. To control these forces, you need rubber. Porous, grippy rubber that grabs the ball for a millisecond, dampens its inertia, and gives it a new direction. This is the physics of friction. Without friction, there is no control. And now look at what Bruce is holding. 2 sticks of hard wood covered in slippery varnish. No rubber, no grip. The coefficient of friction between lacquered wood and smooth celluloid tends towards 0. This means that if Bruce simply places the stick in front of the ball, it will slide off in an unpredictable direction. Physics tells us this is impossible. To return a ball with a nunchuck, you can't just block. You have to strike. But to strike a flying target with an object that is itself in constant chaotic motion is not a task for a human. It is a task for a computer calculating the trajectories of ballistic missiles. The nunchuck chain is a zone of instability. Each link adds a degree of freedom. When you spin a nunchuck, the tip moves in a circular orbit, creating centrifugal force capable of cracking a skull. But try using that same force to hit an object weighing 2 grams so that it doesn't fly into the wall, but flies over a net 15 centimeters high. Chen understood this. In his eyes, one could read not just confidence, but contempt. He decided this wouldn't be a match. It would be a public execution. He was going to use a slice serve. Do you know what that is? It's when the racket passes tangentially to the ball, forcing it to spin backward at a furious speed. Upon bouncing, such a ball doesn't fly forward. It digs into the table, or falls into the net if you try to hit it with a simple, direct strike. To return such a ball with a regular racket, you need to perfectly select the angle of inclination. To return it with a round stick on a chain, you need to repeal the laws of mechanics. Bruce stood absolutely motionless. His pose wasn't a fighting stance in the usual sense. It was a stance of waiting. In Taoism, this is called emptiness. He didn't plan his actions. He didn't think, if he serves left, I'll strike right. Thoughts are a delay. Thoughts take time. And he had no time. He had to become a mirror. A mirror doesn't think about whether to reflect light. It just does it. It became stuffy in the hall. The spectators, the elite of Hong Kong sports, exchanged glances. They expected a show, a comedy, a circus trick. None of them saw the microscopic work that was already happening in Bruce's body. His pupils dilated slightly, switching to peripheral vision. He stopped focusing on the ball. He began to look at Chen's shoulder. Why the shoulder? Because movement starts there. The arm is just a whip that transmits the impulse from the body. By the position of the shoulder, one can predict the trajectory of the strike 0.2 of a second before the racket touches the ball. Bruce read the opponent's anatomy like an open book. Chen began the movement. His forearm tensed. The tendons on his wrist tightened like piano strings. He put all his arrogance into the strike. The racket went down in a sharp arc, grazing the ball with a characteristic tss sound. The ball broke away. It flew low, almost touching the net, spinning furiously around its axis. It was a perfect serve, a deadly spiral. For any person with normal reaction time, this ball would be unreturnable, even with a racket. But Bruce didn't flinch. His nunchucks still hung along his thigh, calm and lifeless. It seemed he was too late. It seemed he would simply let this strike pass to end the farce. But in the world of superspeeds, seems is an optical illusion. The spectator's brain was still painting a picture of a standing Bruce, but his neurons had already sent an impulse to his right arm, an impulse that was to launch the most complex kinetic chain in the history of martial arts. The question wasn't whether he would make it in time. The question was different. What will happen when wood meets plastic at a speed exceeding the speed of a finger snap? Will the ball withstand it, or will it simply burst from the overload, turning into a cloud of white dust? Bruce began the movement, and it wasn't a movement of defense. It was the beginning of an attack. A sound rang out, but it wasn't that familiar, cozy ping-pong sound you're used to hearing in recreational parks. It was a dry, sharp crack, as if someone broke a dry branch right by your ear. In that fraction of a second when the spinning ball touched the lacquered wood, physics should have turned this moment into a catastrophe. Think about it. A sphere spinning at 50 revolutions per second collides with a cylinder moving in a circular orbit. In any laboratory in the world, the result would be the same, a chaotic bounce in an unpredictable direction. The ball should have flown into the ceiling, into the floor, into a spectator's eye, anywhere, but not back onto the table. But the ball returned. It didn't just fly over the net. It returned with such speed that Chen didn't even see the swing. He saw only a white line slicing the air. His body worked on reflexes developed by years of training. The hand with the racket jerked by itself, placing the flat surface under the blow. The ball hit the rubber with a heavy, dull thud. Chen returned it. He was a professional, and his instincts saved him from immediate disgrace. But in his eyes, if you could have looked into them at that moment, a question froze that destroyed his entire picture of the world. How? How can you control the angle of reflection with an object that is itself the embodiment of instability? The secret wasn't in the wood. The secret was in the chain. Most people who pick up nunchucks allow centrifugal force to control the weapon. They become hostages of inertia. Bruce did the opposite. At the moment of impact, he made a microscopic movement with his wrist, a sharp jerk back by a fraction of a millimeter. This created instantaneous tension in the chain. At this critical moment, the nunchuck ceased to be flexible. It turned into a rigid structure, a monolith, hard as a steel rod. This is called the fixation point. Bruce turned chaos into order for exactly 1/100th of a second necessary for the strike, and then released the energy back into free flow. The tempo of the game began to rise. Chen, recovering from the initial shock, decided it was an accident. Beginner's luck, a statistical error. He decided to crush Bruce with tempo. He began to hit harder, left corner, right corner, smash down the center, the hall filled with sounds resembling a sewing machine gone mad. Click, thud, click, thud. Every strike by Chen was an attempt to kill. Every answer by Bruce was the lazy yawn of a predator. Have you ever tried to catch a fly with chopsticks? It's an old cliché from kung fu movies. Now imagine the fly is flying at you at the speed of a car, and your chopsticks are tied together with a rope. That is exactly what Bruce was doing now. He didn't just return balls. He began to play with the rhythm. An ordinary ping-pong player depends on rhythm. 1-2, 1-2. It is hypnosis. Bruce destroyed this hypnosis. He hit the ball sometimes a bit early, meeting it on the rise, sometimes a bit late, allowing it to drop almost to the floor. He tore Chen's timing apart. The champion began to stumble. His legs, usually dancing around the table, began to tangle. His brain couldn't keep up with restructuring the trajectory forecast. And now ask yourself a question. What does a person feel who has dedicated their whole life to one craft, reaching the summit, when they see someone else doing the same thing using, essentially, two sticks for firewood? This feeling is called the collapse of the ego. Chen began to sweat. It wasn't that healthy athletic sweat that comes from exertion. It was the cold, sticky sweat of fear. His breathing faltered. He saw before him not a human. He saw a blurred spot. The nunchucks in Bruce's hands spun with such speed that they created a sort of shield in front of him. It seemed like Bruce was standing behind a fan. Wherever Chen sent the ball, it inevitably met spinning wood. But the scariest part wasn't the defense. The scariest part was that Bruce began to attack. He stopped simply returning the ball. He began to give it spin. Do you hear? Spin. With a smooth wooden stick. How is that possible? The Magnus effect works due to friction, which lacquered wood does not have. Bruce used tangential force. He didn't hit the ball head on, but glancingly, running the tip of the nunchuck along the surface of the sphere at the moment of contact. This required precision, bordering on insanity, an error of 1 degree, and the ball would have flown into the wall. But Bruce didn't make mistakes. The ball began to spin in flight, diving down right under Chen's nose. The champion was in a panic. He darted from corner to corner. His movements became jerky, hysterical. He was no longer attacking. He was surviving. He turned into that very beginner he laughed at 5 minutes ago. And Bruce? Bruce didn't even change his stance. His legs barely moved. He stood in the center of his half of the table, like the axle of a wheel around which all this chaos revolved. There was no tension or triumph on his face, only absolute frightening concentration. And then, at this moment of peak tension, when it seems impossible to go any faster, when the sound of strikes merged into one continuous note, Chen made a mistake. Not a technical one, a psychological one. He decided to risk everything. He saw that Bruce slowed the rotation of his left hand for a fraction of a second. It seemed to Chen that this was a chance, a window of opportunity. He put all his rage, all his fear, and all his despair into one single strike. It was a dead ball, a shot that was supposed to fly over the net and immediately drop down, leaving no chance for a bounce. The ball soared up, rolled over the white tape of the net, and began to fall, almost vertically down. The hall gasped. It seemed this was the end. Nunchucks are a weapon of distance. It is impossible to play delicately with them, right at the net, without hitting the table. The physics of the lever doesn't allow for such a short movement without a swing. Chen had already begun to exhale, ready to celebrate at least 1 point. But he forgot who he was playing with. He forgot that rules exist only for those who don't know how to rewrite them. Bruce didn't swing. What he did next silenced even the skeptics who considered everything happening a trick. Gravity is the only opponent that cannot be bribed, deceived, or intimidated. And right now, it was working against Bruce. The ball sent by Chen rolled over the net and began its vertical fall. It was a dead ball. In professional sports, this is considered checkmate in 2 moves. The ball has no forward velocity, no energy that can be redirected. It simply falls like a stone. To return such a ball with a regular racket, you need to dive under it, almost touching the table, and gently toss it up. This requires the subtlest feeling of the rubber. But Bruce didn't have rubber. He had lacquered wood moving at the speed of a helicopter blade. Here arises a physical paradox. If Bruce hits the ball, the inertia of the nunchuck will smear this fragile piece of plastic across the table. If he slows the rotation, the ball will simply fall to the floor. There was no room for maneuver. The distance between the ball and the table surface shrank to 5 centimeters. Any careless movement, and the heavy stick would split the expensive lacquered table into splinters. Chen had already begun to raise his hands. The signal of victory had already flashed in his brain. He forced the legend to make a mistake. He cornered the dragon, but he forgot that dragons know how to fly. Bruce didn't stop the rotation. He did something that contradicts common sense. He accelerated. His wrist made a movement resembling a whip crack. The free end of the nunchuck, instead of hitting the ball from above or the side, described an arc from the bottom up. It was an uppercut movement, but performed by an object that has no muscles. The tip of the stick passed a millimeter from the green surface of the table. The airwave created by this movement was so dense that it blew the dust off the net. Wood touched plastic, but it wasn't a strike. It was a scoop. In martial arts, there is a concept of sticky force, the ability to stick the opponent to yourself, controlling their center of gravity. Bruce applied this principle to an object weighing 2 grams. The nunchuck stick became a spoon for a fraction of a second, scooping up the falling ball and using centrifugal force as a catapult, threw it back. The ball didn't fly in an arc. It shot out. It was a straight line, a laser beam traced in the air. The ball passed over the net at the height of a hair. It didn't touch the table on Chen's side. It flew further. Chen blinked. He saw the white sphere rush past his left ear with the characteristic whistle of a bullet. He didn't even flinch. Why? The ball went out. It's a miss. Bruce miscalculated the force. He sent the ball beyond the limits of the table. A smile began to return to the champion's face. He won the point. Even if Bruce managed to lift this impossible ball, he lost control over the direction. Physics took its toll. The chaos of nunchucks cannot be fully tamed. But why doesn't Bruce look upset? Why is he already tucking the nunchucks under his arm, not even looking at the flight of the ball? Turn your head. Follow the trajectory of this miss. The ball flew across the entire table. It flew past Chen. It flew another 2 meters in a straight line, not descending, as if gravity had forgotten its existence. And its target wasn't the edge of the table. Its target was something you might have already forgotten in the heat of this battle. Remember the gold Zippo lighter? It stood on the very edge of the referee's table, behind Chen. A small, shiny rectangle, forgotten by one of the spectators. The lid was closed. Bruce noticed it before the match even started. For everyone, it was a piece of decor. For Bruce, it was the only worthy target in this room. A shot in ping pong is an attempt to hit a table measuring 3 square meters. That is too simple for a master. To hit a metal rectangle 3 centimeters wide from a distance of 5 meters using nunchucks and a spinning ball. Now that is a challenge. A sound rang out. It wasn't the knock of plastic. It was a ringing, metallic clink. The ball hit exactly the edge of the flip lid of the lighter. The angle of impact was calculated to 1/10 of a degree. The kinetic energy of the ball was transferred to the mechanism. The lid flipped back with a characteristic click, exposing the wick. The lighter opened. The ball, having fulfilled its mission, bounced to the side and rolled across the floor, losing all its deadly speed. It became just a piece of cheap plastic again. Silence hung in the hall, louder than any explosion. Chen slowly turned his head. He looked at the lighter. His brain refused to accept this information. It was impossible. It was beyond the bounds of human motor skills. He thought Bruce missed the table. He thought the opponent lost control. But in reality, Bruce simply ignored the table. The table was too small a target. Chen was too small a target. This whole match, all these frantic speeds, all these dead balls, all of this was just a prelude. Bruce wasn't playing against Chen. He used Chen as a wall to practice a strike. The world ping-pong champion was just a living training machine serving balls for the real trick. Do you understand the horror of this realization? Imagine you go out for a duel. You prepare, you sweat, you risk your life. And then you realize that your opponent wasn't even aiming at you. He was shooting at a fly sitting on the wall behind your back. And he hit it. Your existence in this equation was a rounding error. You were not the enemy. You were scenery. Chen felt his knees weaken. His racket, This perfect instrument of rubber and wood suddenly seemed to him a heavy and useless board. He looked at the open Zippo lighter and understood that his career, his titles, his pride, all of this had just been destroyed by a single shot that wouldn't even count as a point. Bruce stood in his place. He wasn't smiling. He just looked at the open lid of the lighter, as if checking the quality of his work. For him, this wasn't a miracle. For him, it was just physics. The angle of incidence equals the angle of reflection, plus a little control. But the story doesn't end there, because what Bruce did next turned this moment from a sports humiliation into a philosophical lesson, a lesson Chen would remember for the rest of his life. The sound of the closing lighter lid echoed off the walls of the sports hall. It was a quiet, dry, metallic click, but in the acoustics of that moment, it sounded louder than the gong announcing the end of a round. There was a final period in this sound, end of discussion, the end of an era where speed was measured by a stopwatch and mastery by cups on a dusty shelf. Chen stood with his arms lowered. His expensive, professional racket, an extension of his inflated ego, now seemed to him a useless piece of plywood. He looked at the small metal block of the Zippo standing on the referee's table. The lid was closed. The fire that flared up for a second had disappeared. The mechanism worked flawlessly, and it was this flawlessness that was destroying the champion from the inside. If Bruce had simply won a point, Chen could have found an excuse. The human psyche is an amazing defense mechanism. He could have told himself he didn't get enough sleep, that the light fell poorly, that the floor was too slippery. Losing a game is just statistics, a number in a table. But what happened now wasn't a game. It was a public destruction of the very concept of rules. Bruce Lee didn't just defeat the champion of Asia. He annulled his status. He showed that the table, the net, the markings, these are just conventions for those who don't know how to control space directly. Chen realized a terrible thing. All this time, he wasn't an opponent. He was an obstacle, like a tree that needs to be bypassed, like an annoying fly that needs to be shooed away to get to the real target. Bruce was playing his own game, where the only opponent was the fundamental laws of physics, and Chen just happened to be in the blast radius. Bruce slowly tucked the nunchucks behind his belt. The movement was smooth, fluid, devoid of any aggression. The chain clinked quietly, coiling into rings. This sound made the spectators flinch. They suddenly realized the paradox. A weapon capable of cracking a skull and breaking a femur with one blow had just been used for filigree work with an object weighing 2 grams. It was control on the level of microsurgery, performed with an instrument for destruction. The master didn't linger. He didn't approach Chen to shake hands. He didn't bow to the audience. Why? A dragon does not seek approval from sheep. He turned and walked toward the exit. His steps sounded rhythmic. Click, click, click. The rubber sole of his shoes sprang softly off the parquet. He didn't look back. He was absolutely uninterested in looking at the destroyed world of the champion. He knew he left behind the ruins of someone else's self-esteem, but it didn't worry him. In the world of absolute efficiency, pity is dead weight. When the yellow silhouette dissolved into the shadow of the doorway, movement began in the hall. People started to exhale, as if they had been holding the air in their lungs all this time. The adrenaline level in the blood of those present began to drop, replaced by a state of shock. They exchanged glances, and the same silent question read in their eyes. Did that really happen? And here we come to the main mystery of this story, to what separates truth from myth. Skeptics will tell you that this is impossible. They will tell you that the human eye is not capable of tracking objects at such speed. They will tell you that this was a marketing stunt, filmed decades later, using computer graphics to sell phones. They will bring you formulas, calculations, and graphs proving that the physics of nunchucks does not allow controlling the bounce vector of a ball. But let's be honest. Why, looking at these frames, real or not, do we freeze? Because somewhere deep inside, in that part of the brain responsible for dreams, We want this to be true. We want to believe that human potential is not limited by an anatomical atlas. We want to believe that if fear, doubt, and mental barriers are removed, we too can stop time. Bruce Lee became a legend not because he fought, but because he made us doubt the boundaries of the possible. The Zippo lighter wasn't the goal, it was a symbol that even the most chaotic fire can be bent to one's will if your mind is clear, like water. Chen remained standing by the table. The sweat on his forehead dried, leaving salty streaks. He would never pick up a racket with the same confidence again. That day he lost a title, but perhaps he gained something more. The understanding that the peak of the mountain on which he stood was just the foothill for someone else. The story ended. The light in the hall went out, but the question remained burning, like that wick a second before the click. And now I want you to go down to the comments and answer one question for me. Honestly, without Google or Wikipedia. What do you think? Is this video the greatest fake in the history of marketing, created to sell us an illusion? Or was Bruce Lee really that one single person in history for whom the laws of physics were not rules, but merely suggestions? Write your verdict, because your belief in the impossible says more about you than you think.